cyber, cyberspace, cybersecurity, cyber leader. When we think of cyber leaders, we tend to focus on that root word, cyber. This could be good. It could be misleading. Let's talk about it. Greetings and welcome to the third installment of the Cybersecurity Council podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brammer. We may be joined later by our president, Greene. At the Cybersecurity Council, our commitment is to serve cyber leaders. We want to elevate the thought leaders in cyber and to bolster the entire cybersecurity community. Our goal is to clarify cyber and business best practices. Our call to action, assemble the council, that embodies our dedication to promoting a collaborative approach to cybersecurity. The objective today is to clarify what we mean by cyber leader. This will be the start of a 3-episode series called Searching for the Cyber Leader. The series is asking these questions. What defines a cyber leader? What are the primary roles and responsibilities of a cyber leader? And does role and responsibility differ from function? And then finally, how does leadership apply when managing cyberspace? In part, we're delving into these topics because we want to understand the scope of our entire podcast. But closer to this specific issue, we'll go searching for the domains where cyber leaders can be found. We're going to rediscover cybersecurity and information security so we can see that they're entangled, entwined, inseparable, and come to an understanding that a cyber leader can be practicing in both of these areas. As this series progresses and we get to the roles and responsibilities, we're going to confront the proverbial elephant in the room, the 800-pound gorilla, if you will. To borrow from a sports metaphor, you can't discuss football without mentioning the quarterback. What am I talking about? Chief Information Security Officer, the CISO, sometimes the CSO. The fact is, any conversation about cyber leaders must inevitably acknowledge this particular role. We'll break down the CISO role and we'll see why the role may be the ultimate cyber leader, but it's only part of a larger story. I do believe that cyber leaders can be found across all hierarchies and organizations and not just at the top. In summary, we're going to explore the basics of what defines a cyber leader, and we're going to set the stage for all of the discussions and explorations that the Cybersecurity Council is going to go after in the days, months, and years ahead. In recent weeks, we've been assembling some very compelling podcasts. Those episodes will be coming your way soon. Per our mission and purpose, there are numerous facets of cybersecurity and business that we want to demystify. There are premier voices across our field that we want to elevate. And there are best practices that we want to communicate so that they can thrive out there in the wild. As we've developed these episodes, we keep coming back to this question, what constitutes a cyber leader? We want to make sure that our material on the podcast and within the council resonates with this group, the cyber leader. We want our content to meet your discerning ear, and I'm talking directly to our listeners right now. We're thinking very carefully about who you are, who we all are. In terms of the purpose of this episode, we're hoping to rediscover our self-declared identity as cyber leaders, and in part, allow us to recommit to our intended function. We want to be able to see it clearly. This is a Know Thyself series. This is also a Start With Why series. Let's have some fun. Here at the Cybersecurity Council, with every podcast episode, I try to offer a challenge to our listeners. The challenge is meant to be either a thought experiment to make you a little wiser, or it's an actual act to grow a skill or establish an awareness. In either case, I want you to embrace the challenge and try to let this episode have weight for you in the real world. Here's today's challenge. As we explore the definition of a cyber leader, ask yourself, are you being the kind of cyber leader you want to be, or are you straying from the core mission in cyber? Do you know and understand the core mission? Do you need a helpful reminder? Also, as we get to roles and responsibilities and look where cyber leadership is and where it's going. Are you prepared for the challenges ahead? Are you adapting as cyber and your cyber career grow and change? Cyber leadership has a lot of different demands on it today than it did yesterday, and the demands will be different again in the future. We want the best for you. Okay, so let's assemble the council and get into it. We will build our way to defining and establishing the modern cyber leader. The following set of questions outlines where our journey will go. What is cyber? What is cyberspace? What is cybersecurity? What is information security, and does it diverge enough from cybersecurity to teach us something special about cyber leaders? What exactly is a cyber leader? What is a CISO? Why is the role of a CISO so pivotal in debates surrounding cyber? How do the roles and responsibilities of a CISO differ from those of a cyber leader? Is it one and the same, or is it a square may be a rectangle, but a rectangle is not necessarily a square situation? There are some further questions there. What does the CISO do that almost no other cyber leader has to do? And do any of those subtle differences teach us something about cyber leadership? And finally, we will come back to reality, practical application, and we'll talk about all of the other titles associated with cyber leadership. Senior Vice President, Senior Director, Director, Managing Director, Head of, Global Head of, Lead, Senior. There are many cyber leaders, so many it may make you dizzy. And as I said at the beginning, I believe that cyber leaders exist across the landscape. They're not just at the top of a hierarchy. Roles and responsibilities, functions, leadership. We are going to get there. Once we understand this landscape, we can bring one more question to the floor. What leadership qualities does a cyber leader need to muster in order to be successful? A moment ago, I said our objective today is to clarify what we mean by cyber leader. But as you can see by this list of questions, we're going to go back to first principles. We're going to rediscover some concepts. We want to get this right. Okay, disclaimers. Any source of information, any discovery process has some flaws. I want to offer a couple of flaws that I know are coming up front. Cybersecurity and information security is not one size fits all. The roles and responsibilities that I will call out, they are not one size fits all. Your organization's local culture and business demands may override or obviate best practices. Further, personalities, politics, misinformation, capability gaps, knowledge gaps, all of that can make cyber leaders flex and adapt, sometimes in some unhealthy ways, but it's all for the sake of achieving mission objectives. Flexing and adapting is okay, as long as it's okay. What I'm saying is, if you are not following the best practices or the advice that we're bringing to the table, welcome to the world of leadership. This is okay as long as you are not inducing risks or generating control gaps that are outside of risk criteria, outside of governance, or outside of visibility altogether. Always be shining a light, always be communicating. Lucky for us, we have this entire podcast, and we have many episodes where we are going to explore together cyber leadership. For the time being, we're going to set aside environment and circumstance, but I will leave you with this. Whenever you see a misalignment or a gap, turn to first principles, then communicate. Now let's move forward and try to define some terms. We want to understand what a cyber leader is materially going to lead, influence, or manage. Okay, definition of cyber. The Oxford Dictionary says cyber means relating to or characteristic of the culture of computers, information technology, and virtual reality. I'll say it again, relating to or characteristic of the culture of computers, information technology, and virtual reality. Let's pause to get a second opinion. go to another dictionary. Merriam-Webster says the definition of cyber is of relating to or involving computers or computer networks such as the internet. Again, of relating to or involving computers or computer networks such as the internet. Let's not assess our founding concept cyber just yet. Instead, let's bank those definitions and keep moving forward. Cyberspace. Definition of cyberspace. Cyberspace as a term was invented by William Gibson, a legitimate thought leader for cyberpunk and science fiction. The term cyberspace was first used by Gibson in 1982 in a story published in Omni magazine and then in his book, Neuromancer. That's a good read. I recommend it. In Neuromancer, Gibson described cyberspace as the creation of computer networks in a world filled with artificially intelligent beings. That's pretty prescient. It's got most of the pieces there. One could even argue it's got all of the pieces there. Let's look at a more modern definition of cyberspace, because a lot has happened since 1982. Let's look at the definition of cyberspace per the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. But even NIST recognizes that cyberspace is difficult to pin down. If you go to their glossary, it actually has 4 or 5 definitions for cyberspace. I'm going to take a moment to offer 2 of them. Okay, NIST definition of cyber Exhibit 1. The interdependent network of information technology infrastructures that include the internet, telecommunications networks, computers, information systems, industrial control systems, networks, and embedded processors and controllers. I read that and I'm like, wow, cyber is everything digital. NIST definition Exhibit 2. The complex environment resulting from the interaction of people, software, and services on the internet by means of technology devices and networks connected to it, which does not exist in any physical form. I find the keyword interaction very compelling. So let's summarize what we've just learned about cyber and cyberspace, and I'm going to deliberately simplify here. Cyber is computers and technology, especially networks. Cyberspace is an environment created by interactions within a network or digital system. Okay, so we now know what a cyber leader is paying attention to, cyber and cyberspace. But we don't necessarily know all of the other dimensions, who, when, why, or how. I want to pause here and say that these definitions only tell us a part of the story. Definitions don't offer up impact or effects that something can have on a culture or a society. Cyber can be much more important than the sum of its parts. As I was writing this episode, a CrowdStrike update had a major disruption that impacted a lot of the world, honestly. Our pause brings us here. I was reading a LinkedIn post from Drew Simonis. He's the CISO of Jupiter Networks. And I'm going to paraphrase, but here's what he said. Today is a great or horrible example of what I've been talking about. Cyber is not just a business issue anymore. For everything that matters, we've moved beyond just thinking about it as a business issue. Cyber is now also a societal issue, in that the economy and our lives are highly digitized, and disruption of systems has far-reaching consequences well beyond dollars and cents. Okay. Drew is wise. He's suggesting that cyber is much more than the sum of its parts. He's saying that it can have societal impacts. This is off the page, I know, but he's also saying that it can have political and religious implications. What I want us all to know, even though all we've done is the definition of cyber and cyberspace at this point, what I want us all to understand is that a cyber leader can have societal impact and other impacts. Let that sink in as we keep moving forward. Okay. Definition of cybersecurity. I'm going to offer up 3 definitions for cybersecurity, then we'll cross-compare. We're going to go with people working in the field to government agencies, and then we're going to merge these definitions, or at least think about their commonalities. First, Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a thought leader in content delivery and in cloud cybersecurity. They provide authoritative registry and DNS services worldwide and to the US government. They carry or see a significant portion of internet activity, so they have an informed opinion on what is cyberspace. They also have an informed opinion on what is cybersecurity. Their definition is concise. Cloudflare says cybersecurity is the practice of protecting networks, applications, confidential or sensitive data, and users from cyber attacks. I'll repeat for our listeners. Cybersecurity is the practice of protecting networks, applications, confidential or sensitive data, and users from cyber attacks. I personally think the most important keyword there is cyber attacks. Put a pin in that. Next, IBM. What does IBM think of cybersecurity? In many ways, IBM has taught big tech how to do policy and process. IBM has done it all and seen it all, and they've had a direct impact on defining all the terms in IT, all of them. Okay. IBM says cybersecurity refers to any technology, measure, or practice for preventing cyber attacks or mitigating their impact. To repeat, cybersecurity refers to any technology, measure, or practice for preventing cyber attacks or mitigating their impact. There's that keyword cyber attack again. But if you're thinking ahead, that definition also sounds a lot like information security. We're going to get into that later. All right. Third, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency. CISA is the United States premier agency for all things cyber. Though I immediately feel remiss if I don't mention that other government agencies and warfighter outfits meaningfully innovate and execute cyber missions every day. So it's not only a CISA game. We'll undoubtedly talk about all of those other players in the world of cyber in the future, but I digress back to CISA. What do they think of cybersecurity? CISA is responsible for cybersecurity and infrastructure protection across many levels of government. They coordinate cybersecurity programs with U.S. states, other federal agencies. They improve the government's cybersecurity protections against both private and nation-state hackers. CISA's definition of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is the art of protecting networks, devices, and data from unauthorized access or criminal use. I'll repeat. Cybersecurity is the art of protecting networks, devices, and data from unauthorized access or criminal use. What do all of these three definitions have in common? I see that cybersecurity is centered on confronting cyber attacks. All three definitions, Cloudflare, IBM, and CISA, talk about cyber attacks. I will openly admit CISA is more diplomatic than Cloudflare and IBM. CISA doesn't trot the keyword cyber attack out there directly. Instead, they transform cyber attack into the art of protecting networks and devices. I would argue that CISA is deliberately avoiding the term cyber attack. They're deliberately being more diplomatic. And they're trading cyber attack for the art of protection because they're in the business of de-escalating, while Cloudflare and IBM may be in the business of telling it like it is. But let's be clear, all three of these players are talking about confronting cyber attacks, aka malicious activity. Let's try to summarize. Cybersecurity is operations, current and imminent activities. It's focused on the current and emerging events in cyberspace. Said differently, cybersecurity is active and planned counters to threats. It involves active strategies for both offense and defense. It is active engagement. If we wanted to pose this notion of cybersecurity as questions, it would be centered on operations. It would be like, what are you looking at now? What are you doing now? That is cybersecurity. If I want to expand that, it is, what are you looking at now that might be a cyber attack? And what are you doing about that cyber attack now? That is cybersecurity. It's very action-oriented. In practice, cybersecurity means operations centers and response plans. I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves because we still have some definitions to traverse, but cybersecurity is the operational context. This operational context is where cyber leaders find most, but not all of their roles and responsibilities. We're putting a pin in that too. We have to throw a caution flag on the field of play here. We can't get too comfortable. We can't over-fixate on this operational definition of cybersecurity. That's because we're about to muddy the waters, my friend. Cybersecurity does not exist in isolation. Cybersecurity as we know it today is a result of the past, and we have to consider historical context, politics, the landscape of skill sets and aptitudes, the pace of technological change, the rise and fall of budgets, and even adoption curves. We've got to think about all of that before we limit ourselves to a particular definition of cybersecurity. And within the scope of this series where we're defining the cyber leader, we can't jump to any conclusions about their definition either. So far, I've given you the purist's definition of cyberspace, and cybersecurity, but there's a couple of things I haven't told you. First, let's look at the definition of information security. We have to compare and contrast cybersecurity and information security. We've got to look at this so we can understand the full measure of a cyber leader. As I mentioned earlier, cybersecurity and information security are entangled, entwined, and inseparable. The terms are often used interchangeably. Yes, purists will fight to the death over the separation. For example, you might overhear a security operations analyst say, "I work in cybersecurity, not information security." And they say that as a mark of pride and mission, and you should grant them that. You might also hear a governance, risk, and compliance professional say, "I work in information security, and I don't ever want to work in cybersecurity. That's too much stress." That GRC professional is recognizing that cybersecurity operations and incident response can be both high impact personally and professionally, as well as stressful. But they're also implying that that is separate from information security. So the struggle is real, and this is not just about personal politics. Do you remember where we started with the definitions of cyber from the dictionary? We said, relating to or characteristic of the culture of computers, information technology, and virtual reality. And the other dictionary said, of relating to or involving computers or computer networks such as the internet. These definitions of cyber are very expansive. They include everything that information security includes. Or do they? The truth is, the cybersecurity and information security definitions overlap. They're kind of two sides of the same coin. You see, I have pulled a fast one on you. I haven't given you all of the information. When we did the definitions of cybersecurity from Cloudflare, IBM, and CISA, I only read you the first sentence. With all three of these definitions, you have to accept them within context. And if you keep reading, everything you're going to read is going to sound and feel like information security. Let's observe. So let's return to Cloudflare and consider their full definition. They said cybersecurity is the practice of protecting networks, applications, confidential or sensitive data, and users from cyber attacks. Cyber attacks, we're continuing now, cyber attacks are malicious attempts by individuals or groups to gain unauthorized access to a computer, system, networks, and devices in order to steal information, disrupt operations, or launch larger attacks. Then it goes on and it lists a lot of common types of attacks. So yes, cyber attack remains prevalent, but everything that's in information security, inventory, assets, controls, it's all immediately put into play. Let's look at the IBM definition. So IBM had started with cybersecurity refers to any technology, measure, or practice for preventing cyber attacks or mitigating their impact. But then it goes on immediately to say cybersecurity aims to protect individuals and organizations, systems, applications, computing devices, sensitive data and financial assets against computer viruses, sophisticated and costly ransomware, and more. That sounds like information security, right? Finally, here's the extended definition from CISA. In this case, I literally only read you the first half of the sentence. So let's get the full definition this time. Cybersecurity is the art of protecting networks, devices, and data from unauthorized access or criminal use, and the practice of ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. Now, where have we heard the CIA triad before? That is the foundation of information security. If we accept that cybersecurity and information security are different, that's fine. That even helps us in some ways. But what I want to absolutely stress is that a cyber leader can exist in both of these domains, because cybersecurity and information security are two sides of the same coin. But let's grant that two sides of the same coin some space for a moment. If we want to indulge the purists and seek separation, what would we come to? So it looks kind of like this. Cybersecurity protects the technology an organization uses, while information security protects the data itself. Cybersecurity is active tactics, techniques, and procedures, while information security is policy, logical controls, risk management, and governance. I personally think it is much more helpful to say that cybersecurity is a domain of information security. I personally think it is much more helpful to say that cybersecurity is a domain of information security. If we look at it that way, that helps us unite all of our capabilities and make sure that we're totally collaborating and aiming towards mutual success. I've personally accepted that culturally, colloquially, cybersecurity and information security are terms that are used interchangeably. If I'm working with stakeholders outside of cyber, outside of information security, I might check the understanding in the room if I sense there's a gap or misunderstanding that we have to recover from. Regardless of the subtle differences, cybersecurity, information security, they are both crucial in today's world where we rely heavily on computers and data in our daily lives. But I can't set all of this aside just yet. I have to go back to the struggle is real for a moment. I'm going to give a real-world example of the terms cybersecurity and information security being used interchangeably and even deliberately merged. I had a former employer rebrand its security team. They officially changed the name of their information security team to cybersecurity. This was a big tech type firm with some 500 people working in information security. It was a high caliber team that they had a defined and successful mission. And yet, they felt rebranding was still the right thing to do. I'm not going to argue that big tech knows best, but I am going to try to walk you through how they made an informed decision on this. There were several reasons why the rebranding occurred, and cybersecurity carried the day. It's important to consider some of these reasons individually because it illustrates everything we've been talking about. And the reason I'm pausing for this whole digression is I do feel it has impact on where this entire series is going, finding the cyber leader. Okay, so here's why this big company changed the name of their InfoSec team to cybersecurity. First, appeal. cybersecurity is often seen as compelling and dynamic. It has exciting sounding roles like security operators and threat hunters. It also has penetration testers and incident responders. Cybersecurity has mystique. Cybersecurity has je ne sais quoi. Cybersecurity has celebrity. It's been the new shiny for quite a while, not just in terms of the merits of attraction, but the merits of new capabilities attracting the attention of the landscape. That includes management, clients, stakeholders, etc. So don't underestimate this appeal. It does have benefits. If you change your name to cybersecurity, as this organization did, it helped them mobilize or remobilize internal morale of their information security team, now cyber. I kid you not, the name alone can have an impact on productivity. Cybersecurity implies urgency. Cyber attack implies urgency. And that sense of urgency is not just for the cybersecurity organization itself. The name cybersecurity can positively influence how stakeholders in an organization view the vitality and the dynamism of security in general. Cybersecurity as a title, as a name, it also has an impact on recruiting and the available candidate pool. It cannot be dismissed that today's students take classes in cybersecurity often more because of the appeal of cyber than the appeal of security. As an executive leader, as a cyber leader, I can't tell you how many times I've gone through the process of hiring everything from an intern to a director of security or even a compliance person. And that candidate wants to ask about security operations. How do you do this? How do you do that? Can I work with the threat hunters? Like, it has an appeal. As an added note, my former employer that made this choice to change the name from InfoSec to cybersecurity, they did a lot of diligence thinking about their technology roadmaps and examining 5 years out, 10 years out, would their technology and would their methodologies still be compelling for the candidates 5 and 10 years down the road? We have to be aware that in technology firms, attrition is real, and it's very, very hard to get an engineer for an old technology. So that's considered. And in terms of appeal, transforming your name to cybersecurity is the right call. In the world of public opinion, cybersecurity has more draw now than it did 5 years ago when this name change occurred. I think it was actually 7 years ago. But there's more. Changing from InfoSec to cyber was also an attempt for some organizational benefits. It's kind of trying to cast aside some legacy frictions. Information security in the past, I want to heavily emphasize that, was often viewed as a bit dusty or tired. It was especially true 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago. The rebranding that I observed occurred back in this time frame. Back then, information security was often viewed as a business blocker, the Department of No, or in general, just that InfoSec is slowing down the business. To be clear, as a CISO and cyber leader myself, I do not believe that the InfoSec team at my former employer was a blocker. I absolutely believe that they were an enabler. Further, I firmly believe that my employer, even all those years ago, was way ahead of the game on agile development and continuous delivery, and that the security team's procedures were fast and furious, even back then. But in the broader landscape, yes, InfoSec had, and I'm saying this politely, a challenged reputation. Sometimes changing the name, at least from the perspective of management, is an opportunity to push a reset button. There's still more. Third, rebranding does unleash opportunity. It allows you to focus on the new, or cut weight with the old, or double down on digital transformations to get the old up to snuff with current trends. In some ways, just by suddenly calling yourself cyber, that's going to change some mindsets so you can better align to the business, better empower tech, or just deliver faster. I admit this is intangibles, but a name change sometimes is an opportunity to double down on the intangible forces that you want. My former employer was not alone in this rebranding. Over the years, many companies have rebranded their information security or security departments to cybersecurity, or they've gone and established a cybersecurity team within their information security program. They're trying to capture the magic. Sometimes it's not magic at all. It's just a legitimate way ahead. Now I want to talk about the backlash. There were holdouts to the rebranding effort, not just at my former employer, but across the industry. There have definitely been people, when they see information security get run over by cyber, they say, no, I'm good. I'm going to keep referring to my team as InfoSec. I'm not buying into this cybersecurity fad. That backlash is out there. And I want to share that these holdouts have not just been dinosaur types or don't want to change types. They were wise people that had independently come to the conclusion that I shared earlier. Cybersecurity is a subdomain of information security, or vice versa. Things can be difficult. But I bring up these holdouts because this is a cyber leadership podcast in general, right? And I just want to remind every cyber leader that is hearing this right now, I want them to remember culture shifting is hard work and it is never 100%. Here we are, 5 to 20 years after the cybersecurity, or maybe I should say 40 years after the cybersecurity has initiated as a cultural domain, and the struggle is still real. Where are we on this? I have my answer, and I've shared it. That doesn't mean that everybody agrees. But as we search for the cyber leader, we have to know that this compression is out there. There's another element to the backlash, the holdouts. It is a fact that a lot of companies and organizations have returned to calling their departments information security. They went to cyber and they've come back. Is the cybersecurity trend over? No. In fact, it's very, very possible that cyber wins the day. We'll see. We are living in a world where cybersecurity and information security are interchangeable terms. They can colloquially mean exactly the same thing depending on who is speaking. And that's just the lay of the land. The struggle is real. It continues to be a thing. Find your own way to make peace. What I want to leave you with is cyber leaders exist in all of these areas. And with that, let's summarize what we've learned today. We've explored cyber, cyberspace, cybersecurity, and information security. We've gone on this journey because we want to understand the cyber leader, and we want to understand it from rediscovering some first principles, in this case, some definitions. We've learned that cyber is computers and technology, especially networks, and cyberspace is an environment created by interactions within a network. We've also learned that information security and cybersecurity are two sides of the same coin, and that a cyber leader can exist on both sides of the coin. Okay, we have come a long way. We're going to leave it there for now. In the next episode, we will continue to search for the cyber leader. Specifically, we will cross-compare the cyber leader with the role of the CISO. It's going to be fun. Stay tuned. See you on the other side. Welcome to the Cybersecurity Council. This council strives to showcase unique cybersecurity leadership stories. Its mission is to demystify and simplify cybersecurity across the entire business landscape. Best practices, lessons learned, operational recommendations, it's all here. Brought to you by the Cybersecurity Council, LLC, Brian Greene and myself, Scott Brammer, will be your hosts. We have come in from the cyber wilderness, not just to share what we have learned, but to find and elevate some of the most important voices in cyber. Brian is a former Division I college football player who has experience across many cybersecurity software startups. He has a successful exit on his resume too. He's also the founder and president of this very community, the Cybersecurity Council. Myself, Scott Brammer, I'm a former Marine and active CISO, and I have 3 patents in cyber and risk. As hosts, we are here to elevate best practices and strengthen the cyber community, both for the community itself and its allies. The Cybersecurity Council has had auspicious beginnings here in the Austin, Texas community, but we are already going worldwide. Everyone should be a cyber practitioner. The views expressed on this podcast, either by us or by our guests, are our own, and they do not necessarily reflect the view of our organizations. This podcast is intended as a forum for professional knowledge, but it is not legal or regulatory advice. Always consult your legal professionals for legal and regulatory matters. And now,
assemble the council.